Okay, so let's continue.
We still have
I would like, just a second, I would like to dedicate this shir to today is Ira Shechtman Father's Yahrzeit, so we'll dedicate this shir Le'ilu Nishmas of Roman ben Yitzchak Zechron Levracha. Okay, so the premise of yesterday's shir, essentially, was, and we're up to the Maharal, that's right. The premise of yesterday's shir was the idea based on the Pnei Yeshua and primarily based on the Pnei Yeshua, that the chavivus that the Rambam attributes to the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is, and interestingly, as we pointed out, Ner Chanukah, the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is a mitzvah that you do on Chanukah. It is not Chanukah per se. Chanukah is a day of Halal V'Hodah, days of Halal V'Hodah. That is the definition of Chanukah. Therefore, the Rambam distributes it into his Perek Gimel and Perek Daled. Perek Gimel, which is the essence of Chanukah, is all the halachas of Halal, and Perek Daled, he talks about Chanukah, which is a mitzvah that we do on Chanukah. And it's ironic because my Chanukah, for which Neis is Chanukah, is only Chanukah because of the Neis of the Shemen. And yet, in a way, it takes a secondary place, which is interesting. And yet, again, paradoxically, it is the mitzvah which is chaviva hi ad ma'od. Why is it chaviva? So we pointed out, based on the Pnei Yeshua, that it was an unnecessary nes. A nes is always utilitarian. It's functional. It performs a function, whatever that function is. Nes nigla, which is what we're talking about, usually is to demonstrate HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement, his existence, his involvement, his capacity. The interesting Rambam in Yesodei HaTorah, where he talks about that the Nisim, certainly the Nisim in Mitzrayim and involved in Yitzias Mitzrayim and in the Midbar, were not to validate a Nevuah, not to validate Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah, but L'tzoirech. There was a need to cross the sea, so he did it b'derech nes. There was a need for us to eat in the Midbar, so he brought us down the Mon, and that's an interesting separate subtopic. But here, and that really just intensifies the question, asks the Pnei Yeshua, for two reasons. And perhaps we added a bit of oimek here, was that the ink was barely dry on the Gezerah of the Beis Din of Chashmonaim, that the contact with Shemen, coming into contact with Goyim, would create Tumah. And they could easily have repealed their own Gezerah, suspended their own Gezerah. They could easily have abrogated it in case of exigency, in case of and they didn't. And plus, as the Pnei Yeshua asked, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. So then there was no need for this nes. They could have lit it B'tumah. B, the whole thing that it's forbidden B'tumah is itself only Drabanan and very, very recently promulgated decree and takana. And the point was, as the Pnei Yeshua says, it was Hashem's kiss to us. It was just to demonstrate the chavivus that he has towards us, but not just towards us. And this is where we're going to broaden and deepen it. It is to the capacity of the Chachamim to represent Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Chachamim of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is what the Chashmonaim represented, that that Hashem paid deference, really, by upholding their decree and doing a nes to show that how much he chavivin divrei seifrin, that he loves. It's an expression of love towards Chazal, who are the ones who are sensitive to Ratzon Hashem and interpret Ratzon Hashem in every daira. We spoke about that. We saw the Aris Tavash, and now we're ready to do the Maharal. Let's have a look at the Maharal here. Bottom of page 2. And here we begin to get to some of the heart of the matter. If you remember, we went to the end and we saw the Ramban. Remember the Ramban? Ramban on page 4, where he pointed out that the key problem with the Chochmah of Yavon is hubris, arrogance. The arrogance, empiricism, Empiricism is only that which I can observe, only that which is quantifiable, only that which I can haul into the lab, put under some sort of spectrometer, or and view it and evidence it in physical terms. Only the physical world is said to be the basis of reality. That the entire bandwidth, the spectrum of reality, was defined by the Greeks in terms of science. Science became the new framework within which anything that is said to be real has to fit in somewhere. And otherwise, it's metaphysics. The word atom being Greek, meaning indivisible, etc., etc. And as the Ramban, and it's interesting to note the difference in approach, I suppose, in attitude between the Rambam and the Ramban. So the Ramban here is calling the Yevoni, who is Hikchish Kaldova Zulasi Hamurgashloi Vehegis Dat Elachshoiv Hu V'Talmidav Horishoim. The basic problem was they did have access to beauty of thought. Yaftelekim Liefes, as we said, V'Yishkoin Ba'alei Shem. It does have a place, but it's not the sum total of reality. At the same time, it is Choshech. Why is it Choshech? Because, flip the letters around, they forget that there are many, many things in life which are real and non-tangible, not subject to physical examination and empiricism. I mean, we know this even by experience. Think about emotions, about love and hate and jealousy. You don't even need to go to Hashem, so to speak. There are concepts which are very, very real and very powerful, and yet, and we still suffer from this today. This is another whole story, but maybe not for now. So, having said that, this fits in very much with what we're about to learn in the Maharal. So the Maharal says that Daniel sees the next Malchus in the vision. He sees it kenomer, a leopard. Why? Mipnei ki Malchus zehu keneged chelik hagimel sheba'odam. Now this again. The Maharal here is sketching out a topography of a schematic of man. Ki chelik hagimel hu haseichel. Shahamalchus hazeh hoya by chochma v'hatvuna. There is no question that this was the first society where people stopped being troglodytes, hunter-gatherers, and they were quite happy. Diogenes, is quite happy to sit for 40 years naked in a barrel and pondering the existence, meaning, and, Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living, etc., etc. וכמוש הסבר זה באריכות, כי כל עניין המלכוס זה שהיו מבקשים החוכמה. יוון were מבקשי חוכמה. וכמוש הוא מבואר מן היוונים, וכמוש יסבר. ולא כך, היו נוסנים דעתם על התורה, ולבטל אויסם מישראל. Therefore, they were enamored with human intellect, human reason, but it is still fundamentally human. And this is the Nakuda. It's that the sum total of rationality, of that which is not only real, but of that which is the definition of Chokhmah, has to be comprehensible. It has to be perceived by, filtered through the perception of human. The human is at the apex of all of this. Because the minute you have divine wisdom, it goes against their whole schema. The minute that you bring the divine, in fact, what was they had gods, but who was it? Was it Voltaire? I think it was Voltaire. I think we've discussed this before. Voltaire, beautiful quote from Voltaire. Voltaire said, in the beginning, God created man in his own image, and over the centuries, man has repaid the compliment. Very sharp. Very biting. What's he saying? It's a poshet. He's saying, of course the Greek had, but they didn't have a god. He didn't have man being created in the image of God. It's the other way around in their hierarchy of what is on a pedestal. They had a pantheon. That's again back to a Greek word. They had a pantheon of gods, and their gods were human-like. They fought. They fought with each other. They quarreled over women. Lahavdil. They had gods of. These are all human qualities. They dragged down the concept of divinity itself First of all, you have multiplicity, of course. You have, you have Bacchus and Hercules, and then this one and that one, and they're all, they are exhibiting human qualities, Olympus, and the whole bang lot. But Chas v'Shalom, that should be the other way around, where it is man is created in the image of Hashem and strives to connect to that inner spiritual reality, which is the Makor of Chochmah and Kedusha. Chas v'Shalom, they couldn't have that. Ki lo hayu roitzim shetiyah hachochmah bifrat shehi yoser chochmah v'hi yoser elyono min hachochmah ha'enushis shehaya lahem. They had to devalue, debase, degrade Torah. And therefore, what do? You cannot acknowledge, they could not acknowledge Chas v'Shalom, that Torah is divine. It can't be divine. It's definitely, they said it's brilliant, it's beautiful. It definitely contains wisdom, but there can be no such thing. Any pretensions, any claim for it to be divine in any way has to be smashed. It can't be accepted. And therefore, you know what we'll do? We'll reduce it from the brilliant, beautiful splendor which is Torah in Lashon HaKodesh, which supports so many layers of meaning, down to the shape of the letters and the gematria, and because it's a language of reality, let's reduce it to a monochromatic, single layer of meaning, a simple, one-sided, flat, colorless translation, which only can convey one layer of meaning, because they could not.
That was approved by the rabbis.
They had no choice, but they weren't exactly happy with it.
That's how we pass in the Gemara also.
We don't pass on it was a good thing. They had no choice. They did it.
Who says in the Gemara that you can write a sefer?
Shimon ben Gamliel. That's v'yishkon ba'alei shem. Hi, you have to look in the others v'yishkon ba'alei shem.
But isn't that
Seder
going that direction? Like we still approve it.
That's
later on we could have said no.
The
that was Shazat Chag. And now it's also to do it.
He's only talking about the translation. We're only talking about the translation, not the Ksav. So that's a separate shmooze. That's a good question. That requires a whole separate share. You have to know what the Ksav, again.
There's a Chassam Sofer that I saw a couple of weeks ago. He says that the moment they translated the Torah into Greek, this was when Choshech came, because before that, all Chochmah was directly bound to the source of the Torah, so to say. I'm paraphrasing, but then through the translation there was, so to say, a perceived deviation of where to find the sources of Chochmah. I'll
I know what you're referring to, and he says other stuff as well, and that's not directly today's topic, although it's a very you have.
Yes, I have that.
Okay, hi. Although it is a related topic. It's a related topic. Maybe we'll do a shir when we come to Asara B'Teves. And of course that's connected. Let's go up. Kamoshi ha Torah shehi chochma al hakoil. So it's yoser and yonim and chochma hanushta, says the Maral. They couldn't accept that. V'hachochma hazay shehi al hakoil lo shaykh el ha'umois. And here we're getting to the next point, which is really significant here in Chanukah, and that is the Greeks could not accept that this chochma is in any way divine, different. And the corollary of this, the application of this is, where we're going with this is, that Torah, given what it is, has a connection only to Jews. Now, this becomes, to this day, a very controversial. I mean, we don't find it controversial, but in society today, this definitely would be considered very controversial. Because if it's a question of knowledge, of data, how can you hijack geography, maths, science, biology? Surely, knowledge is knowledge. And given that knowledge today, allegedly, is something that people prize, access to knowledge, access to data, how can it belong to one person? How can you hold on to the data? And we're not just talking about Google or the dark lords of the of AI. That's not what we mean. We mean how can you say that there is a piece of chokhmah which belongs to or is connected to and is only related to a certain racial or ethnic grouping. That doesn't appear to even make sense. The only way to answer it is to say that Torah is far, far more than just the data that it contains. Torah, I mean, can't even begin to describe what it is. It's easier to say what it isn't. It isn't just a question of data. It's not about withholding a certain formula in physics from an ethnic group of people. That would be racism, and But Torah is the bris and the ois between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. It is the operating software, the program that is relevant for a particularly powerful machine called Nishmas Yisrael. Do you hear that? That's really important. I'll say that again because that puts it into, I hope, the correct context. Are you with me? You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If when we talk about Torah and we bemoan the fact that it was then ultimately translated and degraded, if it would just be a question of Torah being defined as wisdom, as knowledge, then it would indeed be difficult to justify or explain or understand. But when we understand that Torah is the divine program that HaKadosh Baruch Hu used to shape and create all of reality, which is holy and powerful, and he then utilized it as the operating system for a very powerful piece of spiritual equipment called Nishmas, the neshama of a Jew, then it makes perfect sense to say that not only that's even if we leave out the aspect of it which is covenantal, which is to do with bris and ois, we can even leave that bit out for the purposes of this discussion. I can make this very generic, almost very technical, very dry. It would be lahavdil, a bit like taking a piece of software which is designed to run the space shuttle and installing it in your scooter, in your electric bike. It's just not the software for that. You with me? You could look at it as a very simple level. Your electric bike will not work. It won't run. You are not doing yourself any favor if you manage to steal the piece of software that runs X, Space Link, I don't know, whatever you want, and then install it into your little Android phone or whatever, or it won't work. You're not actually doing. That's actually it's true. What I'm saying is true. You hear that? Torah is the lifeblood of Nishmas Yisrael. It is our operating software. Necessary for us, not only unnecessary, but not the operating system of the neshama of a Ben Noach or whatever. You with me? We could leave that just at that very simple level. And I think if you think of it in those terms, I think that's actually quite powerful, and it reframes the whole discussion. And that's before you get to the bit where Hashem says, this is the ois and the bris, luchos habris, that Torah is a bris and it's a covenant between me and you, says that exclusive relationship. That's another part of that discussion and related, but you can keep them separate. Okay, let's go weiter. And this is the next bit that the Greeks really, really, really didn't like. Universalism, when you talk about universalism, right? The idea that we're all the same, we're all just humans. There's no difference. Jew in Athens, in Rome, in wherever it is, in Berlin, we're all the same. That's what you hear. And Torah tells us otherwise. And we have to frame this correctly so it isn't misperceived or misunderstood as some sort of superior, racist, supremacist. It isn't. Why not? Let's just say it because I am recording it. So just for the purposes of the recording, we've discussed Aleinu. Remember the two parts of Aleinu? The flip side of privilege of any sort is responsibility. Responsibility. And therefore your pay scale of anybody. Is it racist that the general gets paid more than the foot soldier? Is that... If you have...
what would you answer if someone would say, okay, that doesn't sound racist, but it sounds supremacist, meaning that you're defining that you are the general?
Correct. Well, no, we're not defining we are the general. We believe Hashem defined us as the general. Yes, that is correct. Which means we stand to risk reward. You stand to gain more. You stand to lose more. You don't just focus on it. There is a perfectly level playing field. It's a meritocracy in the sense that, and by the way, I mean, let's not even talk about Geirus or we are the only religion that says that you do not need to be Jewish in order to be in the kingdom of heaven.
I think that's the best.
We leave that, but I don't find it the most convincing. But it is true.
It puts things into perspective. Yes, indeed, everybody else preaches, but forgets to tell us that you're the only ones who think that actually we could also come into the next world. But we definitely think that you will all burn in hell if you don't accept Jesus or Muhammad.
You're absolutely right. I mean, by the basic, ideology, the doctrines of say Christianity and Islam, for example. If you're not baptized, you're eternal damnation. So, and in Islam also, you're a kafir. So we don't say that. We say just shiva mitzvos b'nei basic morality, accept the existence of God and basic morality, and you have a chelik in olam haba. No question about it. You don't have to. In fact, that's why we don't go around looking for converts. We almost, so to speak, discourage it. But it is open to anyone. Having said that, let's get back on track. And that's the way, by the way, so that's important. Risk reward. You stand to gain more, but you also, if you get it wrong, you stand to lose much more as well. Okay, but let's get back to the Nakuda, the point here, which is really pressing and relevant. I see we're not going to finish this whole share. Okay, maybe it was overambitious for a change. Let's move on. So point number 1 says the Maharal. The opposition of the Greeks and the Greek system of thought framework. That whole framework was the concept that there should be anything beyond which can be rationally understood. They were in love with Chochmah itself, but it's mortal. It's human and it's limited, and the man is always at the apex. This is Chochmah, which is above. Now, if it's Chochmah, which is above, it's divine, then it cannot be, then it is not, here's the corollary, here's the consequence, it's not available to all. The says the Medrash in Eicha, if somebody says to you that amongst the nations of the world there is tremendous wisdom to be found, better believe it. That means there is Bina to be found in Har Esav and there is Chochmah to be found in Edom. But if somebody says to you, Torah cannot be found, Torah bagoyim. The primary opposition that the Greeks had to real, authentic Jewish tradition and culture is Torah. Because it means two things, says the Maharal. It means divine wisdom, not just human intellect, supreme, and also it now becomes something that divides and separates because it's something that is an exclusive part of our relationship with Hashem. Let's go on. Daniel, and we're going to amplify this in a minute. So therefore says the Maharal, Daniel saw this third Malchus saw it as a leopard. And here we get to the word that has found its way into certainly the American Jewish lexicon, chutzpah. Chutzpah's made its way into the modern dictionary, right? Zois hachayon. Now the nomer, the leopard, is identified in Chazal, in the Medrash, as he says, in the Mishnah in Ovis, have az kanomer, impudence, arrogance. This fits beautifully with the Ramban we learned yesterday, with Aristotle and others. What was it primarily? It was an arrogance. They became so enamored by their own ability to think and work things out and human rationality that they became totally arrogant and impudent. Yeah, chutzpah. V'zois hamidah hi shayeches el ashehu muchen el hachochma. This midah is it's a form of self-assertion, right? It's Maslow's, self-manifestation. Because the opposite of that, says the Maharal, is, as the Mishnah says, V'lo habayshon lomed. Somebody who is bashful, somebody who is zurückgehalten, and how do you say in German, is Bescheidenheit and Humilität, ich weiß nicht was, yeah? Somebody who, Lo habayshon lomed, in order to be lomed, it is the greatest form of self-expression, to use your brain and work things out. That is because eating, using your hands, using things, animals do the same. What does it mean to be human? It means is the ability to use your brain and work stuff out. That is a form of azus. Doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. We said, Havai az kanomer, we should be. But there is then a fine line between that and arrogance, which is unwarranted and unjustified, where you see yourself, everything just revolves around me, and I've worked something out, so this now frames my reality, and that becomes reality, and anybody else who doesn't match up to that, they can jump in the lake. It's a fine line. Yeah? It's not just something that is for the Greeks. We pride ourselves that we also have this midah, azus. Now, I suppose we also, this is the reason Torah was given to us. So azin, I suppose we also have to give it maybe a bit of a sharper definition. It can also mean resilient, can't it? To be strong and to remain strong. So it's not just azus means chutzpah. Tana Dvei Rabbi Shmuel, Miminoi eish das lamai, Oma HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ru'uyin halalu shetinas lehem eish das. Ikad Amr dasem shelelu, shel malin dilatari shelelu konumu losh nichelam rifneim. Gimel Azan, he goes on to say, Gimel Azan and Sheba'al almost pirish, Bishvil sheyesh lahem ha-Torah, because they have the Torah, Bishvil shezeh dasem shelelu hu eish. Eish has power, and therefore Klal Yisrael uzim Sheba'al. Fine. We can stop there. That we can just take that out of the Maharal. Let's move on, because we want to connect. There's one more thing I'd like to connect, and that is as follows. I think we need to make the connection, because until now we've been talking about Torah Sheba'al, right? So we want to join up the dots here. The Maharal is saying that the hisnagdus, the opposition of the Yevonim, is to Torah, which leads also to exclusivity, that Torah belongs to us. How do we connect that to Torah Sheba'al Peh? And how did it manifest itself in the Chanukah story? And this is what will become clear. I'm going to leave out the Prima Godim. You can do the Prima Godim on your own. It's just a beautiful little piece. But let's go to the Mishnah in Midos. And this is quite a well-known idea, but we're going to flesh it out a bit. You familiar with this? Lifnim mimenu, says the Mishnah, Soireg Gavoya Asara Tvachim. Right? Inside the Azorah, there was a little wall. Let me preface this. Ufartzu choymos migdala. You look very tired, Avi. You're right.
Yeah.
You're out of it. I can see you're a bit. Yeah. You okay?
Yeah.
I would offer you some coffee, but so you just sit back and listen. You don't need to follow inside. Just listen. You just sit back and absorb. I don't know whether you weren't there. So we hosted the Malava Malka for the Bar Mitzvah boy in my house at the school last Motzei Shabbos, and I posed them the following question, and I said to me, what is the connection between 13 and Chanukah? There are many connections. So I said €5 for whoever gets it right, and one boy actually, one of the Bar Mitzvah boys, guessed and got it right. So 13 is an incredible number, an incredibly important number in reference to Chanukah. Number one, there's a Rashi in Zos HaBracha which says that there were 13 Chashmonaim. People don't seem to know this Rashi. I don't know why. It's an interesting Rashi. Familiar? You've heard of it, yeah? 13 Chashmonaim. And here's where it's going to become relevant here.
How many holes were in the wall?
So that's what we're going to get to. So we say, Ufartzu choymos migdalai. We sing, right? They breached the walls of my migdal. Why we refer to the Beis HaMikdash as a migdal is a story for another time. You can think about whatever, doesn't matter. The Migdal, the beginning of Bereshis, never mind. But they breached, so you think, wow, the Yevonim, this strong army, they breached the walls of what was it? Says the Mishnah here in Midos, there was a wall which was Asara Tvachim. Asara Tvachim is 97 centimeters, the Chazon Ish, right? Less than a meter high. Hip height of a male. And the massed armies of the Yevonim, they breached through this wall. It was a little wall in the middle of the Azara. What was this wall? This wall was called the Soireg. It was called the Soireg. Ushloish, says the Mishnah, Ushloish Esrei Protzos Hisham, Shepirtzum Malchei Yovan. The kings of Yovan punched 13 holes into this wall. Why 13? V'chozru v'godrum, so Chazal came and filled them up again. V'gozru kenegdom shloish esrei hishtachavoya, and corresponding to that, they decreed 13 prostrations, acts of giving thanks to Hashem. Now, 13 is an important number. 13 is gematria echod, gematria ahava. It is also the in three-dimensional. Anything that is three-dimensional, the Maral, the Chachmei Kabbalah say that if you trace what's called the Yud-Beis Kavei Alachson, every three-dimensional object will have 12 lines, plus the nominal 13th, which is the center that holds it all together and creates an object. Okay, again, that's just unity and oneness. I'll just take this quickly further because it's beautiful and Chanukah relevant.
That who with the 3D? That's who says?
I can't remember. I'm not sure whether that's Maral, but it's a concept. The Yud-Beis Kavei Alachson.
How is it called? Sorry.
The 12 lines of Alachson is whatever. There's 12 lines in every.
No, just the Hebrew concept. You said Kav Alachson.
Kav Alachson normally means a diagonal. Usually it means a diagonal, but it means Al. Yeah. I wonder whether it's what the provenance of that word is, but anyway.
Just taking a note for Hebrew term.
Yeah, Aleph Lamed Chaf Samach Vav Nun, final Nun. No, but listen to this. So there's a Shloh HaKodesh. The Shloh HaKodesh says as follows. He says we commit to HaKodesh Baruch Hu through our heart, our head and our heart. Our head is the Yud Gimel Midos Shatorah Nidreshes Bahen, and the Yud Gimel Ani Mamins, and Kenegdom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commits to us a uniqueness and exclusivity of relationship, utilizing the Yud Gimel Midos, Hashem Keil Rachum V'Chanun. The last one of which is that no matter what you do, if you do tshuva, Hashem will accept you back. Right? V'nake lo yenake. V'nake lo yenake. He will cleanse. Somebody lashovim, somebody does teshuvah, doesn't matter what you've done, you can never become Yisrael afal pi shechota Yisraelu, right? V'nake lo yenake. Says the Ari HaKodesh, if I'm not mistaken, it's the Arizal, says the Arizal a beautiful thing. Now here, I would do it on the board, but you do it in your mind's eye. Minoisar kankanim na'asoneis la shoshanim. From that which was left over of the jugs, a nace was done to the shoshanim. Mm-hmm. So, says that I think it's the Arizal, and the Bnei Yissaschar brings it. Minoisa kankanim is if you take v'nake lo yanake. So if you take those two words, v'nake yanake, vav nun kuf hey and yud nun kuf hey. If you take out minoisar kan, take away the kan, what are you left with? Yud hey vav hey, which is a multiple of 13. 13 to echod to him. What do we say? We say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, 13, and then V'ahavta. Ahava is also 13. We are miyachid ourselves to him 13 ways. Well, actually 26 ways, really, because in the head and the heart, Yud Gimel Midrash HaTorah Nidreshes Ben, and the Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah, and he responds to us. Yud Kei Vav Kei is Hashem, right? He responds to us with the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. Shoshana, I'll add this just for L'Yodechein. A Shoshana has 13 petals, but it's Shoshanim, so it's a formula, it's double. So Minoisa Kankanim, you have Yud Kei Vav Kei, equals Neis La Shoshanim, it's 26, 26 equals 26. It's a formula. I haven't seen this anywhere, but I think it's a Libyoimani.
Also, I thought about you were saying that Kaf al Achsan is also Yisrael, the Shvat and the 12 Shvat, and they're 12, but together
13.
they're one.
They're 13.
They're 13, or they're 13.
Of course, with Menashe Ephraim as a result of Yosef, Tzion, Tzaddik, Yovam.
Menashe Ephraim. Okay, good.
Yeah, so
but even if you would think classically 12, you could say it's 12, but together you add one, and 12
now that we're on the subject already, so
which makes more sense in this thought.
Yeah. Shabbos, Chodesh, and Milah. Gedolah Milah shenichrusu aleho Yud Gimel Brisos, says the Gemara. There are a possibility of 13 months. And Shabbos is divided into 3. Shabbos Bereishis, Shabbos Matan Torah, Shabbos Lasid Lavoi, 3 themes. 39 malachas. Hashem makes the verbindung. There's 3 sets of 13 ways of how you can deconstruct it. I haven't seen that anywhere, but I think that's pshat. And you can keep going. There's more 13s. I've got a couple of others. I can't remember them at the moment. Al Koponim, and here we see that they breached it 13 times. So this is Ufartzu Choymos Migdalai. What did they do? What was so great about this wall? Says the Tosfos Yom Tov. What was that? Wow, the Greek army punched through a wall 13 times, which was 1 meter high. I mean, anybody could do that. Says the Tosfos Yom Tov. Aval Masha Nirali. The Vilna Gaon also says this, by the way. This little wall in the Azara symbolized the point beyond which a Gentile was not allowed to pass. And that, of course, therefore enraged the Yevonim. That there's a difference in space, in time, in nefesh, yes? We can't go. So the Shlomo Melech davened, as you know, at the Einweihung, yes, at the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash. Anybody who comes here, Jew or Gentile, and he davens, you should be makabel their tefillah. But there was a certain space beyond which a Gentile couldn't go in the Azara and a Jew could. No wonder that enraged the Yevonim so much. And that brings us neatly, and with this I'll just finish because we're not going to finish the whole thing, and that brings us neatly, Chaval got a lot more to do, brings us neatly to Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh. You can just look at just the Pasuk. Soiv l'chos hadvarim ha'ele, ki al pi hadvarim ha'ele, karati et chabris ves Yisrael. Says Hashem to Moshe, after the Egel, ki al pi hadvarim ha'ele. I make the bris an exclusivity of connection, of covenant. A covenant with Klal Yisrael is al pi hadvarim ha'ele. Says the Gemara in Gittin, lo karas HaKadosh Baruch Hu bris im Yisrael ela al Torah Sheba'al Peh. Because he knew, says the Medrash over the page, that time would come when the Goyim would be mishtalit on the Torah. They would take the Torah, they would translate it, and they would say, we are the Jews. And if you know anything about Christian apologetics in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, the claim was, and in some quarters still is, we are the real Jews. And this is what the Radak and so many others had to deal with. So what is the answer? The answer is really, take a Pasuk in Chumash and tell me what it means. Translate it, apply it, live it. You can't, because the key to it is the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and which remained Baal Peh. And because that is that which divides, L'karas HaKadosh Baruch Hu bris in Israel is only on Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that was what they opposed, and therefore now at the time of the Yevonim is the flowering of Torah Sheba'al Peh to demonstrate the uniqueness, and that's the Chavivus, and that is Chanukah. In a very, very short nutshell, there's so much more to say. There's another Maral, there's a Rav Hutner here, there's a Kuzari, there's a Tanchuma, there's a lot more stuff here, but I've given you, I think, the basic idea, which hopefully, ten l'chacham v'yechkam